10 people in the classroom. Wow. Bummer. It's going to be like a good class. Hope everyone did okay on their physics exam if you had physics yesterday. Secret extra credit for showing up. Yeah, but if I give extra credit, then it's not a secret anymore, because you would know it happened. Okay, as long as you keep it quiet. I got my fuzzy window here. All right, well, in the top 10, awesome. There's a lot of top 10 lists out there, so be careful which top 10 you end up in. All right, so yesterday we played with the URL class and actually put together, the beginnings of a pretty rudimentary web browser. And we kind of ran out of time at the end, but I showed you how you can use the a method on the hyperlink event to get the URL, and you could imagine, just using that to reset the page and, thereby execute a jump to a new web page. And if you use a bit of data structures know-how, you can envision, for example, each time you go to a page, building a queue of the pages you visited and then having a back button. And a back button simply, goes back, or make a stack, not a queue. A back button simply takes whatever's on the top of the stack and loads that into your current page, and now you can go backwards through old pages. And if you want to see the history, you can have a history button that traverses your queue or your stack and shows you all the pages that are stored on there. And all the stuff is just code at that point, right? It's some really high-powered machinery for actually going out and getting a web page and displaying it, and that's all bundled for you. And then it's, just code, which means, you do the stuff you know how to do, which is using data structures and writing methods and loops and all that sort of stuff to get, these higher order but really cool effects out the other side. So in the spirit of that mindset, right, what I wanted to do today was just kind of talk about Android and Android development, and go through Android Studio and show you a few basic things, creating a basic app, interacting with, a text field, a button, some debugging tricks, and things like that. Because, you've got a smartphone, and it's basically, running Java. So if it's running Android, it's Java under the hood, and it's a nice, development environment. There's window managers, there's, things for making GUIs and so on. But there's also, all this hardware. There's sensors. There's a GPS receiver. There's a radio, for sending and receiving messages. Tilt sensors, temperature sensors, humidity, light sensors. There's a camera in the back. There's a flash you can activate. There's all this stuff, in these boxes, and you can be in the checkout line at the supermarket, and it's like, oh, here's an Android phone for $35. Yeah, I'll put that in my cart too. I mean, they're disposable commodities at this point almost. But they're pretty full powered, and programming is a lot of fun when you can kind of get outside the box, right? I know we all love, implementing AVL trees and making a rebalance algorithm and stuff like that, but it's fun sometimes to, actually write code that interacts with something outside of the computer itself, and phones are a great platform for that. I had a friend from my undergrad days. He's still a friend. He's one of my best friends actually. He started working on this idea decades ago of making a solar powered plane that would circumnavigate the globe. Um, and it would gain altitude during the day under the propulsion using energy you got from the sun, and then at night it would glide and slowly lose altitude, and then when the sun came up the next day it would go back up, and so it would use sunlight to maintain its flight and mostly glide. And he started specking out positioning and telemetry information and all this kind of stuff. And as the years went by and he continued to refine this, he eventually got to a point one day when he realized he was inventing a flying cell phone, because everything that he needed to do was already sitting on this nice little platform. So yeah, continuously flying UAVs. Um, so let's look at some Android development now. A caveat here is that I have done this before, which means I've gone through the sheer pain, I mean the fun of downloading Android Studio, installing it, going through all of the updates, setting up a virtual device. I've already done that, and I didn't want to deinstall all of that just to go through it again, and it frankly takes a long time to do that. So if you're doing this, from scratch, there's some preliminary steps that you would need to do. That I've already done. But most of it is pretty straightforward. So Android development, there was a time when you would do it under Eclipse. That was kind of wonky. There was a version of software called Android Studio that was kind of built on top of that. Today, Android Studio is basically IntelliJ. I'm not going to rant about IntelliJ, but for better or worse, this is what Android Studio is built on top of right now. And so when you run this, you get a startup window like this, and you can open pre-existing applications. Let me close this out. And we're just going to start a new Android Studio project. All right, so we'll click Start New. And here's probably the trickiest part, is picking what kind of application template you want to use. And the one that works best for me is empty activity. If you do no activity, you're doomed and you wander the planet in sorrow. If you do basic activity, you get a bunch of extra stuff, but it's really hard to get rid of. So I like to start with an empty activity. And then I'm going to pick an application like... I'm just going to call it AAA New App so that it pops up in the beginning of my application lists. Language. So you get your choice of language. You can use Java or you can use Kotlin. If you know Java, well, you know Java. Since you know Java, Kotlin is not too hard to use. I don't understand Kotlin. I've never studied it systematically. To me, it feels like kind of a lazy, more relaxed version of Java. It has, weaker typing, so you can have a variable, and maybe it's a string, maybe it's a Boolean. It'll sort of figure it out. But for that weakness, you have to do things in certain ways. And so I like to stick with Java. And we're in a Java course, so I'm going to stick with Java. Minimum SDK, so there's all these different versions of Android going back, a good number of years. And if you write your code based on the latest, greatest, newest version of Android, it may not work on an older device. So you can pick your software development kit, your SDK, and it's suggesting Android 5.0 Lollipop, which is really old, right? But it tells you it'll run on about 94.1% of devices. If you go with Android 30, it'll run on less than 1% of devices. If you go with Android 14, it runs on all devices. So, and I don't know what the differences are here, but Lollipop seems fine. So I'm just going to take defaults a lot of the time. Let's see what's going on here. Yeah, that was a cool project. App tracking is good. All right, so I'm going to say finish. And then you get this big window. So this is an IDE, an integrated development environment. And as with most IDEs, you get a bunch of files, a bunch of directory structure. You get some code created. You get things that'll yell at you saying, like, you know, I don't know how to load this. But it starts you off with some kind of boilerplate code. Actually, it should be yelling at me. A lot of times when it looks like everything is done, you'll actually still be doing something. And there's a little progress bar down here that if you look down there, sometimes you think your system's hung. It's just working on something. So this always says this. I'm just going to close this window out. So here's Java code, right? We like Java. We know Java. It's got a lot of Eclipse-y things. You know, it will do imports for you. You can collapse sections of code. So if I don't want to see all of this stuff, I can hit this little mark on the side and collapse it, and so on and so forth. Very true, yeah, some methods get deprecated with new APIs and then new methods appear. Alright, so what the heck are we going to do in Android? Up here, there is a device manager. So we could write the stick game totally. So we're going to write code, and we're going to write code for apps that'll run on a phone. Now, if you have an Android phone and you have a pretty fast connection, right, you can hook it up through a USB cable and plug it into your machine and download from there. And you got to do various things. You need to be a developer, so you can look online how to become a developer on your phone. You basically have to go to a setting under System, and you have to tap some information panel like 7 times. And you tap it like 4 times, and it says you're 3 taps away from being a developer. And you tap it 3 more times, and it turns on developer options. And you have to turn on USB debugging. So when I connect my cable, it you know, lets me go to developer options. And you know, I need developer options turned on. And then I also need to go into USB. So, and this changes every time, but right now it's saying USB file transfer turned on. And if I click on that, it says tap for more options. I can go in here. So I'm going to leave that for file transfer. But I'm going to go ahead and unplug and replug my cable. And so it asked me if I want to allow USB debugging. So it's telling me, you know, something on the other side of this cable wants to do low-level stuff on this phone. And I'm going to say allow. And so I can take code that I develop in Studio and I can dump it into my phone. But I'm not going to do that, right? What I'm going to do is use a virtual device. So under Tools, there's an Android Virtual Device Manager, AVD, which will let you basically create artificial phones. So I've already made one of these. It's a Pixel 3 running API 28. I'm going to go ahead and start that. Oh, it's already running. So let me see where my phone is. Alright, so if this is not the case, delete. So you can't be too faint-hearted to do this stuff. So I may have left something running when I shut things down last night. Pixel 3. Just bring my phone. Alright, we'll let people go. Start out log. Okay. Alright, give this a second. I have the phone that ate Cincinnati sitting up here over on my my other display. So let me make this a little smaller. I don't know if that's on or not. I'll let that hang out on the side for a few minutes while we work on an app over here. But this is basically going to be a virtual phone, right? So I can dump stuff onto here and I can run my applications and test them and so on and so forth. Let me go ahead and I think it starts powered up. But there we go. All right. So this is a virtual Android phone, right? And no, I'm not going to sign in. But it's got, you know, a handful of apps and you know, it's well, it's a phone. There's our Clark website, right? So it's a really good emulation, right? It's a virtual. Yeah, I would play Clash of Clans definitely. I'd have to download it. Yeah, it's better than some of the phones I've had. And pretty fast. It's making noise on my soundbar right now, so that's going on. But it's got the whole Play Store. But I'm not going to sign in because that's just disturbing. All right, so we'll be dumping things onto here and playing with them. But let's make ourselves an app. So this took me like you know, years to learn the first time that I tried to do this, and it's a really simple thing. Open up your application, go into RES, which I think of as resources, go into layout, and double click on activity main.xml. Okay, this is your drag and drop GUI designer basically. So you can see there's a default text view down here that says hello world, and it's just kind of sitting in the middle of the screen. So this empty app that I created, right, has just, you know, a text view that says hello world, and we can go ahead and we can run that. So I can say run the app, and it will say it will give me some talk back. I seem to have another version of this virtual phone running somewhere. But I don't know where. Well, that's a bummer. Tell you what, I'm going to shut all of this down. Let's try this one more time. So the graphical part, the layout of an app is written in XML, um, and you can drag and drop from a design window, but you can also go in and tinker with the XML directly, and that's often a faster thing to do. All right, let's see what this does. So I've switched over to my phone, so it's gonna run it on my actual physical hardware. And so there's a little progress bar down here that tells me it's not hung up, it's actually doing something, and it's installing it on my phone. And there we go. So there's my app, and there's the little hello world sitting in the middle. I'm just gonna say always allow USB debugging, right? So you know, not terribly earth shattering. And there's my application. So that was AAA new application, and I can run that, and I get this hello world. All right, so let's use this as our platform. Um, yeah, I could probably try and get this back to the virtual device, but I wanted to end up on the phone anyway, so we'll just stick with the phone. All right, so let's come in here and let's click on. Yeah, that would be awesome, right? Like full contact stick game. Um, so I can change the text field to testing 123, and you see in here it changes to testing 123, and then if I just say go ahead and run that, and come back here, it reruns, and now it's saying testing 123. All right, so this is actually doing its thing. All right, so layout managers. The widgets you create are connected, by these little springs, and they let you kind of like move them around, like that. So if I move that up more towards the upper left, and then I rerun, now it's up there. So that's pretty painless once you figure it out. But until you figure that out, it can be challenging. So let's put a button in here. All right, so I'm going to click on a button, and I'm going to drag a button right over here. So there's a button. All right. Now if I run this, something unexpected happens. So we'll dump that onto my phone, and my run button is all the way up there in the upper left. Right, and it's a button. I can click on it. It doesn't do anything, but it's clickable. And I've actually got some errors in here, and we're not seeing them. But this button is what's called unconstrained. So my testing text view has these springs attached to it that control its distance from each edge. The button doesn't, and so anything that's unconstrained just pops up in the upper left. So over here, not horizontally constrained, not vertically constrained. So drag from there over to the edges, put your little springs in, and then you can position this thing where you want. And you can do fancier things. You can constrain widgets to other widgets and so on. That's fancier than I am on a Wednesday. So, but here we should have the button below the text view, so then we can click on it and see what happens. All right, so that's another few months of learning curve that I went through, that hopefully works for you. You could just use the phone as a stick because it's got an accelerometer, so you could take a pile of phones and throw them on the ground, and then people can pick them up. And if you pick up more than 3 at a time, it deletes your files or takes your picture and sends it to the website of shame or something. That could be cool. Well, no, you get other people to use their phones. It's like drag racing for titles on cars. All right, so let's write some code, right? Because we're playing with stuff that's already there, but let's actually write some code here. Let's see. Yeah, we still got time. All right, so I want to manipulate this text field. So let me give this text field a name. So it's unnamed right now, so under ID, I'm just going to call this, you know, output. I don't know. And this button, this already has an ID button. So as you put things in here, right, what's happening? Well, you're creating XML code. So these three buttons up here are magic, right? This shows you either the XML, a split view, or just the visual display. Yeah. All right. So you know, this is the text view. This is the text that's inside there. Testing 1, 2, 3. This is the text on the button, and not a whole lot else there. There's some constraint information and so on and so forth. One thing that Android does is it's really big on internationalization, being able to make different versions of an app that work in different languages, right? And so if I hardwire a string like testing 1, 2, 3 inside here, if somebody wanted to port this application to use a different language, they would have to go into the XML and change these strings, right? But not change these strings, because these are strings being used by the code. So the usual way is not to embed strings, but to use what they call an @string resource. So basically make these things references to something that's in another XML file, and then all of the text that the user is going to see sits in this one XML file, and then you can simply have different versions of that file for, you know, an English version, an Italian, Spanish, and so on and so forth. So there's all kinds of best practices that we're not going to be able to get through, and there's all kinds of conventions to doing Android development, and these things change over time. And I think it's almost impossible to write an application in Android, come back in a year, and have it still work as well. Because it's a moving target. The operating system is continually changing. Things that worked, you know, under one version of Android won't work under another version, as, you know, best practices change and so on and so forth. So I'm giving you like a really sort of rudimentary, you know, bare minimum hello world, basically, of how to tie things together. But if you were doing, you know, more serious Android development, if you were trying to make something commercially available and so on, there's a lot of details we're skipping. So let's update this text field. So I'm going to go into the Java code itself, which is still just this one method, right? So this is called when the application is created, and, you know, it extends this, you know, app compatible activity, and it uses the super class on create method and sets a view. So it doesn't seem to do a whole lot. All right, so let's put a method in here. So this will be a method for responding to when somebody presses the button. So I'm going to make it public void, and we can call it whatever we want. Click handler, and it takes an argument of type view. All right, let's see. So we want to change the text inside this button. Okay, this button is called output. So so how do we get to, so there's the set text method for that button. But to get to that button, we have to do something. So I'm going to declare a text view, which I'm just going to call, I'll call it message. All right, so we do a find view by ID, r.id dot whatever we called this thing. I already forgot. Output. All right, so typo city. All right, so we don't give this thing the name of a Java object when we put it on our layout, right? It has an ID, and that ID is stored somewhere, and there's something else which will let us use this ID to actually access the object. And so for us, it's this method called find view by ID, and we give it this r.id dot the name of the object that we put in the layout, and that should return an object of that type. I should be getting tons of errors right here, and I'm not, which worries me a little bit. Let me go ahead and make it. Alright, so there's my tons of errors. Alright, so the red stuff you can hover over, and it says you have to import the class, so I'll go ahead and import view, and I'll go ahead and import text view. And I'll get an error here, or a warning. That's okay. And I said I won't rail against IntelliJ, but I will tell you that it does things that you may not want it to do. For example, it turned my whole thing into a single line here. Until I hit the W key. So you know, it's like Eclipse. It'll do its own formatting and indenting and stuff like that. All right, so let's see. We'll find that text view by using find view by ID. That's called message, and then let's just do message.setText, and we'll just set it to our favorite text string, and let's go ahead and run that and see what it does. Alright, so there's our app running, and if I hit the button, nothing happens. Right? And this is what's supposed to happen. Click handler is just a method. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with that button unless we tell it that this has something to do with the button. So go back into your activity main, click on the button, scroll down here, and sometimes you have to change this to show you advanced attributes. But here's something called onClick, and if I pick the drop down from there, I can say on the click of this button, let's call click handler. So now when I hit this button, it should run that code. And let's go ahead and run that. So there's our app. Let's hit the button, and it changes to ha ha ha. It's hard to hit the button from an angle. All right, so let's keep building on this. And I seem to have two windows open up here, and I don't know why, so I'm going to close one of them. So let's write some more Java code. Let's make a count. Let's increment count. So let's, every time that we click the button, let's increment this integer count and print that out on the display instead. So there's the testing 1, 2, 3. So I hit the button, count equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so that's responding to us. All right. So that's kind of a minimal hello world for interacting with widgets, right? And the main things are, make sure that your widget has some kind of ID over here in the layout window, for example, output, and then use this find view by ID to get a hold of an object, and then you can just use that object the way that you're used to doing it with Swing or anything else. And it might make more sense to do this up here inside where the app is created and just save that message in a class variable up here, and then just use it. Different ways to approach that. Yeah, this is the start of Cookie Clicker. All right. So a couple of other things that may be useful if you're doing this. So Java, we like to do system out print line to display information as we run for debugging and information and so on and so forth. So we've got a few options here. We can make things pop up on our display, little information boxes, right? So let's do if every 5 clicks, let's go ahead and display a message. So so the way we do pop-ups, I'm sorry, is called toast. So we can say toast dot make text, and first argument is get application context. I have no idea what that means or why we do it, but it works, right? So this is, I don't know, something semi-analogous to a graphics class or something. But first argument, get application context, and then second argument is what you want to display. So I'll just say boom, and then how long we want to display, and so I'll do toast dot length underscore short. Okay, so that's a static method inside Toast called make text, and then that make text has a show method, and so I'll call show, and we have to import Toast. All right, so if we run that, curly braces. All right, so there's our message. We can tap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th time. We get a little pop-up on the bottom. It says boom. 10th time, get another pop-up. So you can display messages on your Android device while you're running, and it's kind of like, doing a print line, basically. Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes we don't really know what these things do, and we can go into the API documentation and figure out what those are, what those different arguments are, and so on, if that's what's interesting to us. If we're interested in making something that lets us, cookie click and look at consecutive integers, I'm not going to worry about it. And yeah, it's toast because it pops up. All right, so that's one thing you can do for print messages and such. When you're developing, though, right, this is not terribly convenient, and even the short toast, takes a few seconds to go away, so you don't want to be displaying, a lot of messages like that and so on. So there's a more nuanced thing we can do, which is we can make logs. And so, and by the way, I've got VI wired into my editor here. That's not what you get by default. You normally get Notepad. But I got a VI plugin of some sort. So let's make a log message. So I'm going to say log dot, and you can say dot I for information, E for error, W for warning, and so on. I'm just going to do an information message, log.I, and this takes two arguments. The first argument is sort of like a title of the message that you want to display. So I'm just going to tag this CSE223A, and you can use this name to filter your messages. And so my message is going to be click received, count equals count. It's not Tuesday, so I'll fix my typos. All right, so I can just Alt Enter to import log. So my tag is CSE223A. My message will be click received, count equals, and I'll look at the value of count. Okay, so now if I go ahead and I run this, so on here, you know, it works the same. But over here, if I come down to this window that says logcat, as I do things on my phone, I start seeing stuff popping out here. So I'm looking at this AAA new app is the application, and I'm asking for, you know, any message that's tagged as verbose, or any message at all, right? If I change this to info, I'll only see info messages. And so, for example, when I hit my button, there's a message saying, you know, click received, count equals 22. And I'm getting lots of other messages, right? If I hit the home screen, I just generated a whole bunch of messages. And if I you know, click on my new apps button, it's showing me some other information. Basically, all the apps running on my phone, you know, do different log messages. Sometimes just for information like these, sometimes for errors. And so we can filter and we can say, let's just look at anything with the tag CSE223. And now, you know, every time I hit the button, it's just showing me those messages. And if you want, you know, you can get rid of that, and instead of show only selected application, you can say no filters, and now everything that happens on my phone is going to show up. Let me change this to verbose. Right, everything that happens on my phone is going to generate a message that I can see here, and that can be useful and interesting. I'm not doing anything on my phone right now, but this is stuff that's going on. Right, because Android is a different kind of operating system. It's not Linux. Okay, it's not like it sits there and it just, you know, twiddles its thumbs until you do something. Even when you exit an app, it doesn't exit in the usual sense. For example, if I come in here and I say, let's just go ahead and run our application, you notice my count is still 41. And I can bump that up, you know, to 45, and I can go home and I can you know, open my web browser and other stuff. And if I run that app again, my count is still 45. So hiding the window, right, running another application and so on, doesn't necessarily close this. On the other hand, once I've done this, if enough time passes, if enough other applications want resources and so on, Android may decide to close this application, and it may be that when I go ahead and run it, it will be back to its initial state. Same thing if I close it out like that, and then I run it. Now it's back to testing 1, 2, 3, and then it starts off with a count of 1. So the whole kind of life cycle of a process is different. Timeout expired while flushing a socket. There's a cool message. ADB is the Android Debugging Bridge. That's the conduit that you're using to communicate between an Android device and typically something on your system. ADBD would probably be the daemon that's running in service to the Android debugging bridge. And there's mentions of thread activity up here, and this is all stuff that you've been dealing with. And because this is very much Java, we see a lot of crossover to what we've been doing. System out print line, the question would be, where would it print to, right? Because we don't really have a console on our phone, and if you allowed an application to simply display something on the phone, that would literally make people scream, who do Android development. So Android is intended to be used for mobile devices, so it's very security conscious in a lot of ways. So applications run in sort of sandboxed areas. If you want to do something like be able to display information on top of other applications, you need to get permission for that. To pick up a button click and change a text view in an application, we can do that without any special permissions. But if we wanted to, access a sensor, GPS, if we wanted to do anything with the radio, if we want to do anything networking wise, right, you need permissions for those. And there's other XML files that you can set up. So there's this Android manifest XML. You can ask for permissions in here, and then the first time that you run the application, you get that pop-up on Android saying, this application wants to use the following permissions, and you can grant it or deny it. So yeah, it's a different mindset from a system where we have a console that we can display things on, or a keyboard for that matter. All right, what else can I tell you about this? Just that there's a lot of oddities in here, not oddities, but a lot of things that need to be done certain ways. For example, if you want to do anything with networks, right? If you wanted to make something that would connect to your dots game and let you play dots from your phone, you can't do network stuff in this thread. Okay, it's considered a performance/security issue to be doing networked operations from your main thread. So you're forced to create another thread just to do networked operations. Make the app play a sound. I don't know how to do that. Well, I know how to play WAV files, but not just like a quick little sound or something. So there's tons of information out there. The actual API documentation is pretty good, and it's hit and miss. But as with many things, Stack Overflow has tons of information, and you got to be able to find it and not get sidetracked by the flame wars going on. So I don't know, Android API GPS. And so developer.android.com is a really good site. It's worth bookmarking. That's sort of like the official documentation. And they have tutorials, things that will talk you through whatever it is you want to know, but you can also get to the actual bare API. And once you understand how things are set up and how to find what you're looking for, it's relatively straightforward. But like I say, this changes all the time, and if you do this today and you come back in a year and try to do this, it's going to be a new experience. And I dusted off my notes and refreshed myself on all of this stuff last night to do this lecture today. And it took, about 45 minutes, and it's only been, a couple of months since I did anything in Android. So not too much had changed, but certainly if I come back, next year, and that's the first time I try to do this again, I'm going to have to, change some of this and learn some of this new and so on and so forth. But it's a really fun system to work in. It's a nice way to sort of use Java and data structures and so on to do things rather than just, working with data structures for their own sake. So anyway, we are out of time, but that's kind of a quick once over. So tomorrow I'm going to talk a little bit about some other data structures. I want to talk about Huffman encoding and maybe red-black trees, and any questions that people have. And then Friday we'll just talk about the final, kind of wrap up the course. Cool. Have a good afternoon then, and I will see you next time.